everybody in storytelling land. Let's welcome Chetter Galloway.
I remember I was 8 years old and in Virginia, in my hometown of Suffolk, Virginia, and I'd gone to the toy store with my dad. And I saw some action figures I wanted. And I said, Dad, can I get these action figures? And he says, no, those are dolls. Boys don't play with dolls. I said, but Dad, that's Batman, that's Superman. They're not dolls, they're action figures. I don't want any dolls. Well, needless to say, I left the store that day without my action figures. And if I were to get any, someone else would get them for me. Then there was another time I was in the backyard with my father, and he was taking me to go do a chore. And I was walking behind him, and it was a little chilly outside, so I'd folded my arms as I was walking. And he just happened to look back and says, Chetter, unfold your arms. Boys don't do that, or else they'll be calling you something that you're not, meaning a woman or a gay man. Now, even when it came to things like crossing my legs, I was told to cross them in a certain way so I wouldn't be perceived as being gay or a woman. Now, understand that my parents, both my father and mother, were born in the 1920s during the time of the Great Depression in rural North Carolina, where, being a gay person was severely frowned upon, especially coming from the African-American community. So growing up, I had it drilled into me that you didn't want to be one of those things. And by one of those things, I mean an overly effeminate black gay man with processed hair, a really tight shirt as if you have cleavage, and tight booty hugging shorts and wearing flip-flops. So all growing up, in the back of my mind, I was telling myself that I didn't want to be one of those things. I didn't want to be one of those things. Now, mind you, I have no ill will at all towards my parents, and any suggestion or categorization of that or interpretation of that couldn't be further away from the truth. I love my parents. They gave me life. My father gave me the gift of stories. I realized, however, the era and time period of which they were from. And also, they were both strong, devout Christians. My father was a Southern Baptist, and my mother was Jehovah's Witness. So growing up, a lot of things weren't directly discussed with me along the lines of, sexuality, menstruation, or heaven forbid, things like masturbation. So I grew up, discovering and exploring my sexuality on my own. And a lot of that, exploration took place, of course, during puberty. And, for guys during puberty, that's when, that real estate in your underpants is going through some major development. I mean, you start getting your landscape of pubic hairs. You sprout a branch or a tree with some swinging fruit. The bass in your voice develops, and you start getting peach fuzz, and you're supposed to start liking girls. But I wasn't into girls. And something happened during puberty when I was around 12 that assured me of that as my attraction to men manifested. You see, around that time is when we usually were baptized in the church. And I was going to get baptized towards the end of the summer with two other of my friends, right there at the pool and behind the church pulpit. So we go into the bathroom and we're stripping down to get into our t-shirt and trunks so that we can get prepared to get dunked in the pool. Well, as we're stripping down and we're butt naked, all of us start checking one another out and looking at, the progress in our sexual organ area. And nothing happened between us. It was totally innocent what we were doing and experiencing. But I found myself being attracted to my two friends. And as I grew older, that attraction to men got stronger over the years. And of course, I had to keep this to myself because this wasn't accepted within my immediate community. This was a time when some boys were talking about, filling girls' breasts or their butts, or heaven forbid, if they happen to get alone with them and have some privacy, even fingering them to prove their manhood and consider themselves a real man. So early on, I learned I had to mask my feelings towards to the gender that I was interested in, which was men. And this masking continued even during high school. Now, oddly enough, I did find myself talking to a girl in one of my classes. And in high school, when you're talking to a girl, it's almost like you kind of sort of dating, but not quite. And we actually had a date, if you want to call it that. She was a majorette in the band, and she had a football game one night where she performed. So I picked her up after the football game and took her home. Well, before she got out of the car, I asked her if I could kiss her, and she said yes. So I leaned in and gave her a kiss, and she was the first girl that I ever kissed. Now, silly, naive me, I'm thinking, oh, this is going to go somewhere, and I'm going to have my first sexual experience with this girl, and possibly even cure these gay feelings that I'm having in my homosexuality. But nothing else ever happened after that with her, and we just fizzled on out. And during this time, I'm still having, of course, these feelings towards guys, which when I turned 18, I was able to explore somewhat that attraction. You see, I'd always, from a young age, collected comic books, and there was a bookstore in my hometown where I would go and buy the comics. But I also discovered that there was also adult magazines that was sold in that bookstore. So I would use going to get comics as a cover to go to the bookstore and go peruse the adult gay magazines. And when I was brave enough, I found myself purchasing the magazines and taking them home to keep them under tight lock and key. But even then, I didn't have any sexual activity with anyone at all. That didn't happen until I entered college, where I actually did date a girl for a couple of years. And I found myself being able to get comfortable enough with her to tell her that I was bisexual. And the reason I told her I was bisexual is because I still was having difficulty accepting being gay and didn't really consider it man, didn't want to consider it man enough. So saying I was bisexual was a cop out for me. But as you might imagine, that relationship was doomed from the start. So after graduation, we split up and went our separate ways. Now, following graduation from college, my worst fears came to life because I had to move back in with my parents, which was a total nightmare, and into their home in Williamsburg, Virginia. Because in many ways, I was a little child all over again, and particularly that little boy still wanting to get his action figures, who was 8 years old, in the toy store with his father. And it was my parents' house and their rules, and I had to respect that. But even under such strict rules and tight lock and key, I did find a way to sneak out and, have a little fun, which actually came totally unexpected. I remember I had gone shopping on this particular day at the local mall. And I got back to my car and was about to crank it up and take off when all of a sudden I saw this stranger walking towards me. Well, he was motioning his hand as if to tell me to roll down my window. And the first thing that came to my mind was, who the hell is this white boy running up on me like this? Is he crazy? Well, for some reason, I was a little curious as to why I was doing it, because then I thought, maybe he's trying to tell me that, my tire's flat, or perhaps there's something going on with my car that I didn't notice when I got in it. So I rolled down the window and I said, hey, what's up? Well, after some awkward small talk back and forth, it became painfully obvious as to why he was there and that we were both of the same kind, if you will. And I asked him, I said, well, how did you know that I wasn't some lunatic who would have flipped out on you? And his response was something to the effect of, well, I check you out in the mall, and you just didn't seem like that type. So I thought I'd step up and approach you. Now, the whole thing, if you will, may sound a little crazy, but you know what they say: crazy, no crazy, crazy like crazy. And like two wild and crazy guys, well, we went back to his hotel room because he was visiting from out of town on work. He'd driven up from Raleigh, North Carolina. And that was the first time I had a sexual experience with a guy. And we clicked outside of that and wanted to make plans to hook up again, which was always a challenge because of the distance. And we actually did. Now, we were going to hook up for like a third time. And I remember trying to make plans to make sure everything was right. And I was on the phone with, we'll call the guy Terry. And as I'm on the phone with them making plans, my dad walked in the room and I about pissed in my pants. And my dad stayed in the room because he figured something was going on, but couldn't quite put his hand on it. And I got through the conversation with some serious code talking and got off the phone with the guy Terry as soon as I could. So the day came when we were going to meet up. I remember I'd worked 8 hours that day and had made plans to drive the 2-hour journey to a town in Southern Virginia called Emporia, where we were going to hook up at a hotel. Well, I get to the hotel at the scheduled time we were supposed to meet there, and there was no Terry. So I wait and I wait, and about an hour into it, I figured something was going on or something was wrong. So I got out my AT&T calling card and went to a payphone because I didn't have a cell phone. I dialed him up only to discover that he hadn't even left Raleigh, North Carolina. And told me that, well, he was going to try to work things out with his friend. And I was like, what friend is this? I didn't know you had a friend you were trying to work something out with. And that he was going to just stay in Raleigh and he was sorry. He was going to have to cancel and some bullshit line about hoping that I understood. Well, naturally, I gave him a piece of my mind because here I am sitting at the hotel looking like Boo Boo the Fool, waiting for him to show up, and he wasn't even going to make the attempt to do so. But that cancellation of plans was a foreshadowing, if you will, of something to come. Because not too longer after that, my father gave me a 30-day notice that he wanted me to move out of the house. And to be honest, it was time. It was time because I'd been a fifth-year senior at Virginia Tech. And here I was 2 years in her house staying after that. It was time for me to, well, put on my big boy tighty whitey drawers and get out in the house and be a man and move on. And fortunately, within that time frame, I did find a job in my major so that I could move out, be on my own, and live my life the way I wanted to live and be free to be me. In doing so, I gained the courage to do something I'd never done before, which was place a personal ad in a newspaper called Creative Loafing. And how it worked was you wrote up your ad and submitted to the newspaper, and they gave you a voicemail box with a PIN code and a 1-800 number you dialed in to get your messages that the guys would leave you. My best friend referred to it as, well, dial-a-boo. And through this ad, I met all different types of guys, not just the ones that I had seen and growing up with as a child. And the more I grew into adulthood, less of my upbringing affected me and my way of thinking. So that eventually, I did come out to my family and my parents because I was no longer ashamed about who I was and didn't feel any less manly about who I was. And that was really important for me to do so when it came to my dad, considering his view on what a real man was to be. And now, as an older, presumably wiser, elder statesman of the gay community, if you will, I have a better appreciation of its diversity and knowing that there's a whole range of people and types, from average Joes to comic book nerds and sports jocks like me. And with that, I have a better understanding of the importance of when it comes to using pronouns for people in their gender identity, because that's not necessarily a black and white issue, or fits a narrow scope or definition. Now, as for me, um, I'm fine identifying with the skin I'm in, and by that I mean my pronouns are he, him, and his. And I also have a better understanding of the definition of real manhood, because real manhood, or being a real man, doesn't lie with one sex or the other, or what you do in bed, or who you lie with, or how you look. It lies within yourself and who you are. So, who am I, you might ask? Well, I am what I am, and that's all that I am. One strong, proud, Black gay man. Thank you.